Hello and welcome to this webinar of my favourite subject, which is raising awareness around alcohol. Thanks so much for joining me today, and thanks to the Lattice Group for inviting me along today to discuss this subject that we quite often find difficult to talk about. Before everyone comes in, it'd be useful to know there'll be a poll running throughout this webinar, and also if you've got any questions you want to ask me, you can pop them in the question box and I can answer them at the end. And I'm really looking forward to this today as well. It's something I feel really passionate about, having this conversation. So what to expect in this webinar is understanding the impact that alcohol can have in our lives, the different types of drinking, recognising your drinking habits, maintaining a healthy relationship with alcohol and benefits of trying an alcohol-free lifestyle. And there might be a few of you at the moment who are trying dry Jan and what that looks like and what to do at the end of it, and how to change your relationship with alcohol and learn how to manage cravings and triggers, social anxiety, holidays, stuff like that. Moving on. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about my own story. And I grew up in Croydon, down south. You can tell by my accent for anyone's here. And it was a normal kind of upbringing. Mum and dad didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a lorry driver and my mum worked in a biscuit factory. But we always had good meals. It was quite a comforting childhood, really. And we used to play out a lot. Of course, in those days, we didn't have gaming or social media or anything like that. So we used to go out in the morning and come back when it was dark. And I always remember there used to be the carpenters playing on the record player and my dad tinkering around in the garage. And it felt quite safe. I used to go to school in second-hand clothes and stuff, but it didn't really bother me at the time. But the older I got, I imagine I was about 9, 10, I noticed that mum and dad were arguing a lot more. There was slamming of doors and, you know, periods of time that there was no talking going on. And I used to sit in my bedroom quite a lot. And one day I went downstairs and they hit me with a bombshell that they had bought another house somewhere. And that meant me leaving all my friends that I'd known all my life and changing schools as well. And at the time it felt really traumatic for me. And we moved, and I remember my first day at school was horrendous for me. Walking into the classroom where people had formed their own relationships, I just stuck out like a sore thumb. I wasn't streetwise, I was quite shy, I was nervous. And I remember going home that night and saying to mum and dad, oh, I hate this, why have we moved? And a typical kind of tantrum, but obviously I had to carry on going to school. And gradually the lads from my classroom used to come and knock for me to see if I was going to go out. And I used to say to mum and dad, look, tell them I'm ill, tell them I'm not around and whatnot, because I just didn't want to go out. This went on for a few months, and one day I went downstairs and there was an envelope on the table. And I opened up the envelope and it was horrible. It said, Dave, just to let you know, I've left your dad. I'll be in touch. And bearing in mind, there was no mobile phones, there was no social media, there was no internet, and I didn't know what that meant. And I went to school and came home and my dad was in pieces, and for the next few weeks it was just hideous. You know, my dad was upset, I was upset, it really rocked the whole family. I didn't know where my mum had gone, why she had left. She hadn't had a conversation the night before. I didn't really know how she could have done that. But one night I was in my bedroom and I heard laughter, a woman's laughter, and I thought, Mum's home. So I run down the stairs and there was another woman sitting there, and my dad had met someone really quickly. And I remember feeling that I wasn't made to feel very welcome. And one night I said to her, "What's wrong? What have I done?" And she just tightened and rolled her eyes. And I looked to my dad for him to help me out, and he just walked into the kitchen, and I've never felt so rejected in all my life. And I remember walking out the house and I was crying my eyes out, and I bumped into some of the lads, and we went up to the shops and they bought some lager. They got the adults to buy some lager from the off licence, and they handed me a lager, and I had my very first drink, and I was 14 years old. And I remember how it made me feel. It made all the pain go away. It made me feel accepted because they were laughing at me. And I had the second one, and they said to me, "You're all right, Dave, actually. You're not a nerd, you're okay. Actually, you're quite funny." And I felt really accepted. I felt one of the gang, and I fitted in, you know. And this happened more and more often. And back in the day, we didn't have a need for ID. So we could go to the pubs, and I was drinking with the grown-ups and playing darts and playing pool and being one of the boys, you know, and all of a sudden I'd become part of something. Going through my teens, my 20s, my drinking, I would say, was quite normal. You know, clubbing at the weekend, just working in the week, never really drinking at home, no need to. But it changed when I was in my late 20s, and a friend of mine, who's actually a neighbour, invited me to the local pub. And it was a Young's pub, and I fitted in like a glove down there. I was in the carpet trade at the time, and I was a quick drinker, but I soon got myself a reputation, and they called me Glugs, because I would glug the beer down. And looking at these pictures on the screen now, you can see some pictures of how my drinking got to, you know, like my early 30s, it got worse and worse and worse, and I started drinking more and more and more down the pub. And one day someone said to me, "Are you an alcoholic, Dave?" And it really shocked me. I was like a sensitive man, you know, and it's like, oh my God, what's my drinking look? I'm not falling over, I'm not like being found in alleyways or drinking out of a bottle, you know. It was like just normal socialising. But when they said that to me, it changed everything for me, because I felt shamed. So instead of stopping drinking, I used to moderate down the pub and go to the off licence and buy some takeouts and go home. And I would drink a lot more indoors, and I would get drunk, and no one was there to judge me, shame me. And on paper, it looked like I was doing okay. And this went through my 30s, but I started to put on weight. So I changed from lagers and ciders to wine. And back then you could buy 3 bottles of wine for 10 quid. And I thought, well, that'd last me a couple of days. But instead, I ended up drinking 3 bottles of wine a night. And I put even more weight on. And then I did the worst thing I could have ever done, was Google what alcohol has the least amount of calories. And I put vodka, right? And I was never a spirit drinker. And I bought half a bottle of vodka and drank that in no time at all, and had to go back to the off licence and buy more. In the end, I was drinking a litre of vodka a night, every single night. On my own, indoors. I stopped socialising, I stopped answering my phone. But the irony was I was still functioning, because I was going to work every day. So I was waking up in the morning. I had the worst hangover, but I would say I never get hangovers. But I think I was constantly hungover. I had a string of failed relationships. My life was a mess. I was 21 stone in weight. My blood pressure was shocking. My mental health was terrible. And it had to come to an end, but I just couldn't end it, because I was just so addicted to this drug, you know. And it got to a stage in my late 40s that I was approached by BBC, and I went on DIY SOS. And then after that, I was approached by ITV to be a carpet fitter on ITV's 60-Minute Makeover. And I got a gig on that show, and in TV, drinking was rife. So we were going out every single night after the show and getting drunk, going to bed at 2 in the morning. And it was just relentless. Moving on. How did I get sober after all that? I went through my early 50s the same, and it got to a point in my life that I went to the doctors because I was feeling really ill, and he said, your blood pressure is so bad you could have a heart attack. It was something like 186 over 125, and even then I wasn't giving up drinking. I was on antidepressants, anti-reflux tablets, but one day a friend of mine texted me, and I had another hangover over another weekend of heavy drinking, and the text read, "How would you like to join me in stopping drinking for 3 months?" Now, I looked at this text and it was like, I can't even stop for 3 days. What are you talking about? You don't know me. I got all defensive. But throughout the day, I started to wonder, I started to explore that conversation. I wonder what life would look like in 3 months if I stopped drinking. And I got quite excited about it. So I texted him and I said to him, "Are you in?" Bearing in mind, he's never in. He said, "Come and see me." Now, the golden moment for me was that he didn't judge me. He didn't say to me, "You need to stop drinking, Dave, you're a mess." He collaborated with me and he invited me to join him to stop. So I went round to see him and he was just standing there like the great Messiah, and something in me just said, this is a real opportunity now. You've got this moment now. You either turn left or you turn right. And I put my hand out and I said to him, "Let's do it." And that was the last time I ever had a drink, was the night before. And that was the 7th of January 2019. And I've just celebrated 6 years of sobriety. And I'm healthy, my life is unrecognisable, I'm mentally in a great place, everything has changed for me. And these are the reasons why I do these webinars, to tell my story, to say that hope is possible, you can change. I like to discuss the different types of drinking, and that's where we're going to go now. We're going to move on to the next slide and understand what problematic drinking looks like, and how do you know if you have got a problem? Because when I was drinking, it was either you like a drink, you don't like a drink, or you're a raging alcoholic. But it's different nowadays. There's a lot more information out there now. You know, social drinking, consumed in moderation, typically without negative consequences. It's like, if you can go out and have a drink and go home and have a cup of tea, that's something I could never do. But that's the question I have to ask people who come to me is, can you have one drink and then a cup of tea? And a lot of people say to me, "No, I want another drink." What is grey area drinking? It's occasional overindulgence, but not meeting dependence like I was. So it could be a few glasses of wine in the week, or not drinking in the week and binging at the weekends. Binge drinking, consuming large amounts of alcohol in a short time period. So that could be over the weekend. You know, you could be really good in the week, but Friday, Saturday and Sunday you're binge drinking. Heavy drinking is regularly exceeding recommended limits. And we're going to talk about limits later on, which is 14 units for men and women. And you'd be surprised actually how little that is when you tot it up. And where I was, alcohol dependency, whether you're physically or psychologically reliant on alcohol, often characterised by the inability to control use, which was me, because I felt like I couldn't go a day without a drink. Moving on. What are the signs to watch out for then? Increased tolerance, needing more alcohol to achieve the same effect. So for example, when I talked about the fact I was buying 3 bottles of wine for 10 quid, and I thought that that would last for 2 or 3 nights. Within no time, I was drinking 2 bottles of wine a night. Between no time after that, I got stuck into the 3rd bottle, and before no time at all, I was drinking 3 bottles of wine or a box a night. Other signs to look for: anxiety. The anxiety I had when I was drinking was chronic. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling, sweating, shaking, dreading the next morning, wondered why the hell I drank the night before. Drinking to cope. Using alcohol to manage stress, emotions and problems, that's a massive one. Hiding alcohol, concealing drinking habits or frequency from others. You know, I used to hide alcohol all the time. I would come in and I have little miniatures hidden in my briefcase, bottles of wine under the bed, because I felt incredible shame. You know, I was ashamed that I got to this point in my life, yet I needed it. Breaking promises, making commitments to cut back. You know, lying to your partner or loved ones, saying that you're not going to drink and you have some on the way home, or you've hidden some in the cupboard and you have a quick Swifty. You know, they are other signs as well. Moving on. And this is an interesting one that I like to talk about. What is a unit of alcohol and why does it matter? You know, the UK alcohol guidelines is an absolute maximum of 14 units per week, but you'd be surprised to find out that a large glass of wine is 3 units and 5 pints of lager is over your allocated maximum units per week. And when you tot that up, you know, when I used to go out, I'd have 5-6 pints of lager on the way home, you know, on one sitting, and then go home and have wine after that. So 5 glasses of wine per week, large glasses, is your absolute maximum. So when we ask that question to ourselves, do we drink more than that? It can be quite educational for you to look at it like that. How does alcohol affect the brain? You know, you get a loss of emotional control. You know, I remember having the first couple of drinks and you're really, really happy, and then all of a sudden you can feel quite emotional, and the more you drink, then you can maybe get a little bit aggressive, and then you can get tired. You know, it affects blurred vision, blackouts. I remember trying to watch a film and waking up in the morning and couldn't remember the end of it, sending text messages that you can't remember sending, impaired memory, reduced ability to learn new information, raised blood pressure, slowed reflexes, shaking and tremors. That was one of the things as well. How it affects the brain and the body. Increased heart rate and blood pressure. As I said previously, my blood pressure was 186 over 125, and the doctor said to me that that was high enough for me to have a stroke. And that wasn't just my drinking, it was my food choices. I was eating a lot of takeaways, I wasn't eating properly, my sleep was terrible, dehydration. You know, you wake up in the morning, you feel absolutely terrible. My anxiety was one of the worst things that I had to manage. You know, that 3 a.m. wake up when you're just really, really nervous and worried. Depression. You know, alcohol is a depressant. And this is something that I really want to be firm on, that when I used to go to the doctor and say to him that I was depressed, not once did he ask me about my drinking. I was just put on antidepressants. And then I went back a few months later and said that I still feel depressed. And he said, right, let's double your dose then. And then I went psychotic. So depression and addiction run alongside each other. Cardiovascular risk, you know, heart disease, linked to several cancers. Alcohol is a carcinogen. It can cause up to 7 different types of cancer. And I saw an interview recently with Julia Bradbury, and she said these statistics that the chances of reoccurrence if you've had breast cancer are 28% if you still drink alcohol, which is ridiculous, you know. And I don't know why these statistics aren't on labels, on bottles as well. Fatty liver, hepatitis and cirrhosis. You know, that's the most common thing, cirrhosis of the liver. Now, what is grey area drinking? Now, this is a relatively new thing now that I work specifically with people with, and you'd be surprised how many people fit into this category. It's a middle ground where alcohol use isn't classified as problematic, but still causes disruptions in daily life or emotional well-being. So signs of grey area drinking are using alcohol regularly for relaxation or stress. So as we said before, good day, bad day, any day. The sun might be out, let's have a glass of wine in the garden, or it might be a really cold day, let's light the fire and have a glass of red. Rationalising or minimising drinking habits, so you kind of find yourself making excuses for yourself. Difficulty reducing consumption, so you might promise yourself you're only going to have one glass of wine with your dinner, but you end up having 2 or 3. Abstaining during the week but binge drinking on the weekends. I touched that before, because you kind of kid yourself that you haven't got a problem, yet Friday comes and you end up getting a couple of bottles of wine from the supermarket and drinking them, having to buy more the next day. And the repeated attempts to quit and then struggling to maintain it. And the amount of people that I've spoken to that said, you know, I've given up for 6 weeks, but I just can't give it up altogether. I don't know what life looks like without it. And that's a big sign as well. Let's take this moment then to reflect of what I've said so far and ask ourselves these questions. What would you like to change about your drinking habits? What does it look like to you? Why would you want to change it? How does alcohol benefit you? And I love to talk about it, and I will do later, of the benefits of not drinking, because they far outrule the other, believe me. How can alcohol affect your mental health? Now, this statistic scares me to death, and you know, I'm an advocate for changing labelling on bottles now, because all it says is drink responsibly, and they're handing us a drug that is highly addictive and giving all the responsibility to us. But when you see this statistic, it says between 30 and 40% of all suicide attempts have one thing in common: alcohol. To me, that is shocking. That's absolutely shocking, and there should be more awareness around this. How alcohol can affect your mental health? The emotional impacts, as I said before, increased risk of depression and anxiety. You know, when I say I was depressed, I didn't even want to get out of bed in the morning. That wasn't just because I had a hangover. My life wasn't worth living. I got myself in such a state, and I was so depressed that I didn't care if I lived or died. And my anxiety was just off the roof. Frequent mood swings. It was like playing Russian roulette with me. I was either really up or really down. I was really irritable, totally unpredictable as well. Poor sleep quality. You know, drinking affects your REM. If any one of you've got a smartwatch and you look at your data, if you've had a drink the night before, it's really bad. You know, leading to fatigue the next day. And we all kid ourselves that, you know, we need a drink to be able to get to sleep, but it just knocks you out. You don't get any sleep quality if you've had a drink. Lack of motivation, reduced focus. We've all been there when we've had too many to drink the night before, and you go to work the next day and you've got a big project on and you can't focus, you feel lethargic, and you're getting it in the ear roll from the boss and you just want to go home and get under the duvet. Declining productivity or work at school, and we put school there because I was drinking when I was 14. You know, I used to go to school with a hangover. Social consequences, strain on relationships due to conflict and neglect. And that, you know, for me, that was quite common, running thing through my life, where I was unreliable, inconsistent, and risk of burnout from emotional and physical exhaustion as well. And I used to kid myself that didn't really affect me, but I was just totally exhausted constantly. Drinking and workplace culture. Why do people drink at work or work events? Well, stress relief, high pressure deadlines, and let's face it, it's socially acceptable wherever you look, drinking now. Demanding workloads, going home, working late hours, social expectations with team bonding, happy hours after work, feeling obligated to join in, to fit in with all the others. Examples of alcohol in the work culture: pub lunches, standard team outings, offices stocked with booze in the fridges. I remember once I went to see my son in his office in London. It was a Friday afternoon and everyone was half sozzled, and they had 2 double fridges full of free booze. I couldn't believe it. And non-drinkers feeling left out or judged. That's another issue as well. Alcohol's impact at work. How does alcohol affect the workplace? Key areas of impact: productivity. As we said before, reduced focus, efficiency and performance. Imagine going to the pub on a Friday afternoon and having a few in the pub and going back. You're not going to be focused to work in the afternoon. Sick days and tiredness, greater risks of errors, accidents and safety violations, team dynamics, strained relationships, poor communication, lack of trust. You know, if you're coming back regularly from the pub and you're not pulling your weight and there's someone who is, there's going to be a real change of dynamic in the team there. How do you support someone in the workplace that you notice might be struggling with alcohol? And if you remember what I said about my friend, how he approached me, he approached me with pure empathy and kindness and wasn't judgmental. And if he'd have told me I need to sort my life out, I would have probably drank more. But the way he was sensitive. So approaching the conversation is maybe suggesting going for a walk or a coffee and just checking in with them, asking them how they are, how things are, rather than directly saying, have you got a problem with drinking? You know, listen actively, express concern, offer support. You can signpost. There's so many groups out there now that can help with this addiction. There are communities, there are books, there are great podcasts out there, and respect boundaries, that if they don't want to go there, just be gentle with them, and hopefully one day they will. Now, what is the toolbox for change look like? How do you change your relationship with alcohol? And identifying triggers is a big thing. And I always say that we have a window that we like a drink. And luckily for me, I was never a morning drinker. I was someone that would perhaps on a weekend, because the football was on, and then I used to make the excuse that everyone's down the pub at midday anyway. I would break the rules and drink midday at the weekends. But generally in the week, it was 5 o'clock that I would kind of think about having a drink. So identifying that window that I would drink was a real big one for me, because I had to do different things. So I would go for a dog walk, or I would go to the gym, or I'd even go upstairs and have a hot bath and then look at my iPad and watch a documentary or a film or listen to a podcast. I had to do something in that window that I would normally drink to divert my mind. You know, managing social pressures, relationship, looking at habit. There's a great book there by James Clear called Atomic Habits, where you identify the 5 pillars of habit. So it's collecting this data so you can see where you get your triggers and cravings from, and you can fill the gap. One of the biggest things as well is creating a plan. Without a plan, you're just flailing around and day counting. So it's creating a structure to each day, keeping busy, managing how to sit with your feelings. That's a big thing, because the feelings start coming back thick and fast. Setting boundaries. So my boundaries was non-negotiable. I'd get up in the morning and say, right, today I will not drink alcohol. And tonight when I put my head on the pillow, I will be sober. And that stopped the conversation of maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. I've done really well, maybe I could just have the one, because that's just pointless. Seek support. There's so much out there on the internet now, Facebook groups. AA is another one. You could go to a meeting, talk to a friend about it, you know, a close friend that you can trust, and just say, look, to be honest, I've noticed things have been getting a little bit out of hand with my drinking and I'm trying to stop. Is it okay if I check in with you every couple of days? Just so you've got somewhere safe that you can talk to. There are a lot of quick lit books out there at the moment, but there's also a lot of books that can help you understand the science behind it now, like Drink by David Nutt and Alcohol Explained by my friend William Porter. And you can learn all about addiction, how the brain works, and that can be really useful as well. One of the things that I did was exercise, because it set my day off with intention. So the guy Piers who suggested the 3 months, he had a big garage, and we set up a turbo trainer in his garage, and we put the back wheels of our bike on there, and we would have a chat about life and that, and we'd do an hour on the bike. And what that did, that encouraged me to set my day off with a good start. So I wouldn't go to the cafe and have egg and bacon. I would have something healthy for breakfast, and then it would make me feel more positive about the day. And potentially, I think, I could shift some of the weight I put on from my unhealthy habits. Tips for living an alcohol-free life. As I said before about habits, a lot of the time it is a habit, and these are the things you can ask yourself. Is my drinking habitual? Do I get in from work and go to the fridge and automatically pour a glass of wine? Do I have a beer when the football's on? Think about your habits, write them down and think, when do I normally drink? What is my routine? When it's sunny, do I want to ask people around for a barbecue? Does it have to include drinking? Can I do it without drinking? Set realistic goals. I mean, for me, the 3 months was a really good plan for me, because I've tried dry Jan before and I didn't make it through, but 3 months gave me enough time for me to make that change. But for you, it could be a month, and you can make a plan in that month, and that can be going to the gym, but going to a sauna, because sometimes exercising at night doesn't help your sleep pattern. So you could go and have a sauna, you could go and have a massage, get your hair done, your nails done, meet someone for a coffee, decaf. Set realistic goals, as in each day. What I said to you, put your head on your pillow at night and think that's day 3, day 4, but do the work. It's no good day counting because you're not actually putting in the work. So read your Quit Lit, read these scientific books, listen to podcasts, and again, find the support. There are a lot of good apps out there as well, like the Try Dry app, and there's a day counter on there. There's a Reframe app that talks a lot about science as well, and you can learn about addiction. Sober Curious challenges, do things that don't include drinking. It could be a bike ride, it could be a sponsored walk, raise some money for a charity. And books, I've already mentioned books, but that there are so many out there now that are really, really brilliant, and life stories and also informational books. And professional help, many people come to me for help, and there are a lot of other good coaches, therapists. There's no harm in going to see a therapist, because what is the reason behind the drinking? There's always a why, and sometimes going to see a therapist to explore trauma, childhood trauma, can really, really help you work out why you're drinking as well. Benefits of living alcohol-free. I could talk to you all day about this. Enhanced mental clarity. Absolutely. A lot of people that give up drinking within a few weeks, they feel a lot more alert and with it. Job productivity is better. They're more available with their family at home. Better physical health. If you're going to get up and go to the gym in the morning, you're going to get fitter. Stronger relationships. A lot of mine was lying, and it was a big thing for me. It was hiding my drinking, and I was so ashamed of it. It was a big part of my shame that I was living through, and it lowered my self-esteem. I didn't know who I was anymore. Higher productivity. I mean, I was in the carpet game, and every day I would get up and go to work, and it was hell, literally hell. But when I was stopping drinking, I was more positive. I could look the customer in the eyes. I could say, I'll have a cup of tea, and I'd have a chat with them rather than go upstairs and just hide. Clearer skin. I remember Susanna Reid, the GMB presenter, she gave up drinking because her skin was bad, and it cleared up within weeks. Before, I talked about sleep quality. You get no REM with drinking. It affects the brain, and you just pass out. So sleep was a big thing for me. And in the beginning, it took a while to get into the pattern of it, but within a few weeks, I was sleeping 6, 7, 8 hours a night, which we really do need. Increased energy, Absolutely. Better parenting. You spend more time with your kids rather than thinking about going downstairs and topping your glass up. And I say potential weight loss because in the beginning, quite often the sugar monster comes in, and so many people say to me, oh, I can't stop eating chocolate or cake and that. And I say, look, for now, don't worry about that. The main thing to concentrate on is stopping drinking. And we can look at that later on because, you know, we're lacking the sugar in the alcohol and you do get sugar cravings. So when I say potential weight loss, that's debatable. I mean, I did in the beginning because I did a lot of cycling and I set myself 3 challenges that were long bike rides. In fact, I did the London to Paris bike ride over 4 days, and that was something I would have never done before. So yeah, potential weight loss. Building healthier cultures, creating a supportive workplace, making conversations available and normalise them, reducing pressure to drink at work events, you know, have some alcohol-free options, promoting inclusive activities that don't centre around alcohol, you know, doing different things. Invite guests to come in, like today. You know, I love talking about this and it raises awareness. I was at an event the other day and the Q&As went on for an hour and a half because it really sparked conversation that people aren't used to having. And it doesn't necessarily mean it could be you, it could be a loved one, a relative, could be a parent that's struggling with alcohol. But as soon as we raise awareness, it opens a conversation. So it's really important thing to do. Lead by example. Foster open conversations. Create a space for honest dialogue about alcohol and its impact on health. You know, alcohol is the only drug that we have to justify not taking, which is insane. It's 2025. You know, let's have these open conversations. If you're giving up caffeine, you get the cheers, well done, I drink too many coffees myself, or vaping or smoking, brilliant, well done. I'm giving up alcohol. What? What's wrong with you? Don't be boring. It's madness. Promote healthy choices, you know, encourage alcohol-free options in social settings. Me and my partner went to the inauguration of the mayor recently and we were offered either warm orange juice or warm lemonade and there was nothing else there. The rest was alcohol and it was just crazy. Reduce the stigma, support colleagues who choose not to drink, make it normal and respect their decision. Let's make it a normal thing not to drink. And I was talking earlier with someone and, you know, we were saying that the younger generation, it's not even a thing now. There seems to be a generation where it is a thing and we need to change that and normalise it. And be a role model, demonstrate alcohol-free living through your own behaviour. You know, be positive about it and say, you know, I'm loving it, I'm not drinking. Don't go in there saying, well, you know, I'm not drinking and be all shy. Shout it to the sky, you know, be proud of yourself. Addressing workplace drinking stigma, you know, challenging stereotypes around alcohol use and sobriety. Dispel myths like only problematic drinkers drink, or non-drinkers aren't fun, or being sober is boring. I can assure you it absolutely isn't. Foster a workplace culture where choosing not to drink is respected and celebrated. You know, it should be. It's an amazing thing to do. Create a safe space for conversations around alcohol choices and mental well-being. And quite often I go into corporate environments and have these open conversations and people talk about it for days after. You know, it reduces the stigma in these conversations. And highlight positive role models. Share stories of colleagues or public figures who thrive in alcohol-free lifestyles. You know, I recently interviewed Millie McIntosh and she's got her book out, Dry Drunk, and she's so proud of herself. And she was on Made in Chelsea and it was a big drinking thing then, but now she's sober and she sings it to the sky, and it was a brilliant interview and I'm so proud of her. And you know, let's normalise it with everyday people like myself, that I was drinking for 4 decades and I'm so proud of myself that I've stopped drinking and I promote it wherever I go and I'm not afraid of what anyone says to me at all. So, in closing, have you been thinking about your own relationship with alcohol? You know, you might be doing dry January, you might have tried to stop before Christmas, or it might be after a holiday abroad where you've drank too much. You know, a lot of these holidays are fully inclusive. Have you evaluated your relationship with alcohol? Have you attempted taking a break only to go back on your word within a few days? And we know how that works, right? You have a few days off, you think you've done really, really well, and then you want to reward yourself by having a glass of wine. And quite often, more than not, it's not a glass of wine, it's 2 or 3. And, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people that have said they're going to give up forever, and within a few days or a few weeks, they believe they can moderate. And more often than not, they go back to exactly the way they were before, and moderation isn't on the table. What changes would you like to make to your drinking? You know, would you like to drink less in the week? Would you like not to drink so much at the weekends? And it's all these questions we can ask ourselves, and I hope that this webinar has helped you maybe think about your relationship with alcohol as well. And I know, I think we've got some Q&As coming up, and hopefully there's some questions that I can answer, and there's some polls as well.
So Andrew asked, did you suffer with the allergy of alcohol, whereby once you started you couldn't stop?
Yeah, I mean, I did, and that was because I began to rely on it, and it's interesting because I had a genetic test done and a nervous system test done recently, and they found out that I'm low on serotonin, I'm low on vitamin D, and I also have a faulty dopamine receptor, and these all count towards me being a binge drinker, because I'd have one drink and then I'd want 2, 3, 4. So I can never ever moderate ever, and I think once I knew that, that really helped me to decide that I cannot be a normal drinker, and that's why I realised that I had to stop drinking. So yeah, 1 was never enough for me, it was always 10.
Martin asks, what was the thing you found the hardest when you stopped drinking for good?
That's a great question, and I think in the beginning it was accepting that my relationship with alcohol was over, because I was in a relationship. It was a 40-year love-hate affair with alcohol, and the thought of not drinking on holiday, on my birthday, at Christmas, terrified me. But I also reframed it in a positive way of, I'm going to have a birthday, I'm going to have a holiday, and I'm going to see the next few Christmases. So reframing it was a huge thing for me, and staying positive, because my drinking made me a really negative person actually, and I was always a half glass empty kind of person. And when I stopped drinking, I realised that I had to change, and I had to be really positive. So reframing it to actually what are the benefits of me not drinking rather than the negatives really helped me.
Great. I'm hoping people can hear me, because we've had a few things in the chat saying that they can't hear me. So maybe just repeat my question
Okay.
just in case they can't. So Victoria asked, if people do not identify with AA, what support is out there?
So if people don't identify with AA, what other support is there? There are a lot of Facebook groups. I have one myself, and we meet every Thursday at 7 p.m. and we check in, and there's some people in there that are new, that were a few days, or there are people that are 2 years sober in there. And there are other communities out there as well. There are a lot of lives on social media that you can follow. You know, I mentioned my podcast before, they're life stories that I cover weekly, and people come on from all walks of life, and similar to myself earlier, tell their story. And sometimes that's really useful, because I know for me, when I was in the depth of my addiction, I felt completely alone. So when you're stopping drinking, the last thing you need to feel like is alone. And I went to AA, and it's a fantastic organisation if it works, but for me it didn't work. And I had to find something else. So community was huge for me. It made all the difference.
Leonie has asked, can I please ask how you support someone who you can see is struggling but don't seem to admit they have a problem?
Right, how would you support someone you can clearly see who is struggling? That's always a really tricky one, because as I said on my webinar, if you go in being judgmental, that can quite often have the negative effect. So I think it's being supportive and asking the right questions, and maybe just asking how they are, how they're feeling, rather than going in, do you think you're drinking too much, or judging. There are also areas of support for yourself as well. There's a charity called With You, and they really help you with supporting yourself, because quite often if you're with someone who has an addiction, it can be equally draining on yourself as well. And quite often we don't look after the people who are in relationships with an addict, and it's important that you know how far you want to support this person as well, because you should have your own boundaries. But also timing as well. There's no good asking or having a discussion with someone first thing in the morning if they've got a raging hangover, or if they're about to drink as well. It's picking the right moment and maybe going for a walk and just having that non-judgmental, friendly conversation, telling them that you really care about them and you're there if you need them to be there for them as well.
Leonie's just said, can you repeat the name of the support group?
It's called With You charity.
Fabulous. Lorraine has said, I'm attending today to learn more about alcoholism on behalf of my dad. My dad lost his wife, my mum, to cancer in 2023 and has been heavily drinking ever since to cope. He doesn't admit he has a problem. He is heavily dependent on alcohol, drinks every day and has all the health side effects. Do you have advice on how I can approach this problem to help him?
Okay, so when you've got a loved one that's dependent on alcohol and they don't want help, it's one of those things that are really, really difficult to manage, because there's no absolute answer to it, because someone has to be ready to stop, to want to stop. And if they're not ready, it's almost like you're flogging a dead horse. So it's about you getting support as well. And it's maybe reaching out to that charity as well, because they've got a helpline to get support for yourself. And they have to really want to give up or make a change for it to be able to work. And you know, that's a really difficult question to ask, actually. And it's also for people that I work with as well. If they're not willing to give up, I have to ask them to come back to me when they are.
Beth has said, I've been sober myself now for just over 2 years, and I know a few others who say that their first 5 years was the hardest. Beth said, however, she hasn't found it difficult. Did you find any point of your first 6 years harder than others?
Great question. So did I find any part of my 6 years difficult? Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It hasn't been smooth sailing, and I've gone through a divorce in that time as well, and that was challenging. I've moved several times in that period of time. That was challenging. But I've always had the belief that my life is so much better without alcohol in it. And, you know, some people say to me, do you think you'll ever drink again? And it's easy to say, no, I'll never drink again, because you don't really absolutely know that answer. But my answer is, I don't want to ever drink again. I really do not want to ever drink again. That relationship is dead and buried now. And my life is so good now. And I genuinely mean that. Like, every day I wake up and I'm so grateful that I've got rid of that drug out of my life. I love the work I do. And yeah, life is up and down, you know, whether you drink or not, it has ups and downs, but it's how you manage it. And I've managed to deal with all these things with a clear head, with a positive mindset and a better attitude. So, yeah, I've had some challenging times, but I'm so grateful for where I am. And congratulations as well on your 2 years. That's amazing.
Jane said, during that first 3 months of you stopping drinking, at what point, or did you start to feel better or different? How did you deal with those first few weeks?
Great question, James. So how did I feel in the first 3 months? In the first 2 weeks, I was like absolutely on fire because I was like, I can't believe I'm doing it. I've gone a day without drinking, you know, one day, I couldn't believe it. And then after a couple of weeks, it started to rub off a little bit. But I kept going, and I remember there was a pivotal part 6 weeks in that I was walking my dog and I saw the pub that I would normally go into. And it was like a light bulb moment of, I'm halfway there. In 6 weeks' time, I would have done my 3 months and I can go in there, and what would that look like? And what that would look like would be ordering 3, 4, 5 pints, going to Londis over the road, buying 3 bottles of wine, drinking one on the park on the way home and going in drinking the other 2. And it was at that point that I realised that I was absolutely done. So although he had said to me 3 months, it was after 6 weeks that I realised that that was it. And it was like the biggest weight off my shoulders. I walked the other way from the pub and it's like, it just went away from me, and it's like, this is it. I'm now going to be sober for the rest of my life.
Callum's asked, what are your thoughts on alcohol-free products to assist with stopping drinking?
Right, my thoughts on alcohol-free drinks are split. I always say that if they're at all triggering to you in any way, even 5%, don't go near them, especially in the beginning. But I've also known them to really be helpful. And when you think about what I was drinking, you would think that I would find them triggering, but ironically I didn't. And in the beginning, I would have one bottle of Heineken Zero or whatever it was, and it actually helped me. And it helped me in social situations as well. And funny enough, I don't actually really drink them anymore. I've got them, but I just don't bother. I drink lime and soda, kombucha. I don't really bother, but it has to be right for you. So if you find the thought of it triggering, don't go near them. If you have one and they make you want to actually drink a real drink, then stay away.
So we'll do the last question now. So for anyone that's watching that's doing Dry January now, what would you recommend for them to continue going, Dave?
I would say use all the information that you've taken from Dry January, whether it be have you slept better, or your relationship better at home? Do you feel more positive? Have you been better at work? Are you feeling more energetic? Take all that information and use it. Don't just think, well, I've done it, that's a big tick box and I can go to the pub on the 1st of February and get drunk. There's no point in doing that. You've done a month and that's always the hardest bit. Push through, do another week. Do another week and see how you feel after that. And then after that, do another week. And who knows, you don't have to give up forever, but you can change your relationship with alcohol. And that's how a lot of people do it. And they say to me, you know, I did Dry Jan 3 years ago and now I'm 3 years sober. And in the beginning, I didn't intend to stop drinking forever, but I noticed so many benefits that I just carried on. And here I am 3 years later. So you don't know what's around the corner. But, you know, my biggest thing is explore the idea and see where it takes you.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. Do you want to sign off, say goodbye?
Yeah, thank you so much for watching today. I feel so grateful, and thank you for the Lats group for inviting me, and I hope it's been helpful. There's more info on my Instagram at SoberDave. There's loads of stuff on there. And thanks so much for joining.